So is there any public comment at this point? Here.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So I see you guys have the legislative agenda and the Scott proposals there. So I thought I'd make a couple of comments about those. We had 50 teachers in the library earlier meeting with Representative Noyes and Representative Boyden. And I've been kind of combing through all these proposals for a couple of weeks now. And I just want to encourage you guys to get active on this. There's a lot of Democratic legislators and Republican legislators who feel the need to do something. And these proposals have come out, and I really hope that's not what people do, because I think everybody knows we need to fix property taxes, right? There's a lot of people who are overburdened by this, but there are many, many ways to fix the funding problem and out of control property taxes for folks without completely reinventing our education system. And I see most of the proposals involve the consolidation of governance. So a 5-member board with people who have maybe never attended any of the schools in this district or had any children in this district or ever attended a basketball game or a bake sale or a musical in this district, making decisions for this district. Looking around the table here, I see a lot of good people, many of whom I disagree with frequently, but you're in your communities and you're listening to your property tax paying neighbors, and you're listening to your neighbors who send their kids here, and you send your kids here, and collaboratively, all of us together, make the decisions that are best for this district. And you do a really good job. You're very responsible with the taxpayer dollars, very responsible. And also, we run programs here that are great for kids. I can't imagine what that would look like with governance being decided by a 5-member board, probably in races that would raise money and have political parties involved. I think that would be a real disaster. Plus, decisions on closing schools would be sent to an unelected, appointed, partisan, unconfirmed bureaucrat in Montpelier. I don't think anybody in rural Vermont who voted for Republican candidates to lower property taxes wanted a Montpelier bureaucrat deciding which schools were open and closed. And as far as the property taxes go, there's a couple of things on the table that I hope you acquaint yourself with, one of which is a proposal that's come from Public Assets called the income-based education tax. Unlike any of the legislation coming out of the Agency of Education or Governor Scott's office, you will see a bill on this. And I would strongly encourage you, this would get rid of the property tax, which is what voters wanted folks to do. So you really need to reach out to your legislatures. You really need to talk to people in your communities about what this means and that there are solutions to property taxes that don't involve destroying the systems you folks have built up. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Okay, and seeing no other public comment at this point, we will. There's public comment. Okay. Very good. So on the agenda. Minutes from the special meeting on the 7th of January, on the 13th of January, and the curriculum committee meeting also on the 13th of January. Do we want to approve those minutes all at once?
Yeah. So moved.
Any questions, comments? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor of approving these 3 sets of minutes at the same time, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Okay. Board orders.
Thank you. So I have reviewed the board orders that are listed in your agenda.
Do you have a motion?
Second.
Any further questions? Okay, hearing and seeing none, all those in favor of approving the board orders, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Okay. Legislative updates. They want student matter, okay? Student matter first.
Jen, are you looking to go into executive session because we are discussing students? We're looking for that motion, please.
And we want to the board.
All the board and administration and.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay.
We just need a moment.
Okay.
Do you have anybody on there that's not
Yes.
board?
A couple rules.
Just one. That's all right.
Yeah, we'll do select days after this executive session, anyone?
Do you know how many you printed?
I printed 17 copies.
Okay.
And I'm not going to be handing them all out.
Right. So I'd like to state that the board has received the report reviewing the anti-harassment, hazing, and bullying policies and procedures in place at Johnson Elementary School. The board notes that there were no findings of improper or omitted policies or procedures. The board also has received the report reviewing specific allegations of harassment, hazing, and bullying, and sexual harassment, and agrees that with the conclusions that policies and procedures were appropriately followed by Johnson Elementary School and district personnel. We support the Johnson Elementary principal and staff, as well as district staff, and can commend them for their hard work and dedication.
We have a motion for this.
So moved.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving this motion, say aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Okay, thank you. On to legislative updates. Did you want to just go?
The policies. So as part of our education quality standards timeline, we are reviewing all of our policies. This is a first reading for 5 policies. Drug and alcohol testing of transportation employees, employee unlawful harassment, which is timely, tobacco prohibition, pupil privacy rights, and animal dissection. So I'm going to briefly mention what has changed from existing policy to new policy. And again, for those of us who may not be familiar with policies, we adopt the model policies from the Vermont School Boards Association because they are all legally vetted. So if we were to make a change, and I'm saying this actually for you, if we were to make a change of a simple word, we would need to have that legally vetted because policies are just that. And they're intentionally broad so that it doesn't tie the hands of the board. And we develop procedures that do not need to be board approved, but they are procedures that administration develops that that adhere to what the policies say. So drug and alcohol testing, the simple change on this is that the previous policy had policy and procedures in one document. That is really not appropriate. So the new policy, again, vetted, is a very simple statement about testing employees. And it just says that that our supervisory union will comply with state and federal laws and regulations requiring drug and alcohol testing. And then the procedures are on a separate page, and they talk about when an employee is tested. And the 3 main things to remember are it's before hire, if there's an accident, and occasionally there are random tests done. So that is the first one. Read it. We will, at the next meeting, have a second reading and a probable adoption. Second one, employee unlawful harassment. Lots of changes to this one, and this is timely because we have had a number of school employees who are on the verge of being unlawfully harassed. So it felt good when we spoke to legal to bring this up so that it is in the minutes and people understand what this means. The unlawful harassment now removes the terms political affiliation and marital status. It has been changed to unwed person, which I still have an issue with, but that is how they capture it. It adds crime and victim status to definitions. They talk about sexual harassment and saying that such conduct has the purpose or effect of substantially interfering with an individual's work performance. They have removed the word performance with the suggestion that anything, I might think it's a big deal, you might not think it's a big deal. They have taken that equation out and saying if it is the perception of the person being harassed, then it could ostensibly be harassment. It needs not be severe to be unlawful. Those are the key words there. It could be any unwelcome verbal, written, or physical conduct. It could be an auditory harassment. It removes, the new one removes his and her, which is appropriate. It just says that you can't discriminate against somebody because of age. It doesn't say anything about gender. Those are the big changes. This is worth a read. Everybody needs to be familiar with this policy. Interestingly, bullying is not something that we can talk to a community person about against an employee. There are no protections there. However, there are protections against defamation and slander. So I say that because we have had several situations that potentially could meet that definition. So this is the second policy. I encourage everyone to read it. Tobacco prohibition, the only change to this one is that they've changed school-sponsored activity to public school-sponsored activity. Pupil privacy rights, there's no difference with the exception of separating the policy from the procedures. And in the new policy, procedures are separated. And then animal dissection. It's a fun one to read. It's very specific. The statement of policy and the definition are now the policy. The procedures talk about not holding it against students who may not want to participate, giving them the opportunity to opt out, and giving them an opportunity for an alternative way to learn, which we should all have. That's it for the policies. Again, next time we will have second reading and probable adoption.
Oh, I know. Which one do you want us to do it?
Which one, what? Yeah.
Okay. Continued discussion regarding Belvidere Central School Building.
So last week, I put together sort of a memo of notes or a compilation of notes. So ultimately, the question is, I think we've come to the point where the board just needs to say, we want to keep it, or we actually want to look at disposing or discontinuing ownership. Article 8 of the Articles of Agreement for the merged district is the only article that is going to apply in this transaction. Belvidere stopped actually operating as a school almost 2 decades ago, so the Article 4, where the board has to vote to close the school, doesn't apply at all. And under Article 8, the only restrictions to the use of the building, should a town, the town of Belvidere in this case, I'm thinking, desire to take it over, is that it must be owned by the town and used for community and public purposes for a minimum of 5 years. Should the town choose to sell the property prior to 5 years of ownership, the town will compensate the unified school district for certain capital improvements made after the Act 46 merger. I listed those out, but basically it's about $57,000 worth of boiler and pump replacement, heating coil replacement, and mold remediation. Recently, the building has acted as a site, a remote site for the Belvidere Waterville Pre-K. That's now been moved back to Waterville. In the packet I sent last week, or that Michelle sent last week, both Carrie Bullard and Jan gave sort of an update on how that's going. It looks very positive. The kids are getting a good interaction with the other students from the towns. By all accounts, everything's fine. It's a space pinch, but I'm not really sure how that's impacting anything negatively at the school. It's just a space pinch. And there are some discussions about maybe switching the rooms might help, but that's something that you and Carrie have been talking about. The cost to operate the building in 2024 was actually just about $60,000. The budget was higher, but heating oil and water and sewer increases that were anticipated didn't come to fruition. There's no special considerations to apply. There's no outstanding debt associated with the building. The last bond, or the bond, was paid off in 2017. So as far as those considerations, there just really isn't. Dylan has prepared a list. Into that list of, you know, the most recent. If we had concerns, mostly it's the siding. If we were to use the building, keep the building, try to utilize it for a different purpose, it's the siding, about a $50,000 project. Less urgent, and certainly for a new owner, would be totally up to them, would be an upfit to LED lighting. And maybe a couple of the windows have lost their seal. That's the condition right now of the building. So the big question is, if the board wants to take it up, would they want to move forward with eliminating ownership of the building? Or do they want to postpone that decision for any longer?
Anybody have any thoughts?
Is there anybody from the Belvidere Select Board on line right
Earl joined for a moment when we were in the executive session, but he did not stay very long.
And really, so in my black and white brain, so forgive me if I'm being too blunt, because that's not my intention. The district owns a building, they're not sure if they want to keep it or not. There's potential the town might be interested or might not. But the first question is, does the district want to move forward with possibly eliminating ownership?
So do we make the town an offer and then they accept the offer? Or is it
I
they
think
have to
we can
accept the
tell the
offer?
town that it's available,
Okay.
and then they can decide if they want it or not. You know, if you want to know within 60 days or 90 days or 120 days if the town is interested. If the town is not, then the board is free to try to sell it.
now? We should probably give it at least beyond town meeting. Well, beyond that. There's definitely two camps, like, you know,
That
yes.
seems, it
So-
seems,
So, I mean, I like when you said 120 days, I mean, that feels like that gives the whole town, community time to really think about it, the pros, the cons, and really come together for an informed decision. I mean, maybe 60 days might be
You
enough.
can even say June 30th, it's the end of the current fiscal year. I mean,
That's
and then in the new fiscal year, the board would move forward with whatever. So we need to move
give
forward.
them an option to accept our offer by June 30th. Is that kind of a,
To just tell us if they're interested in acquiring the building. It's not gonna cost them any. The articles basically say it would be turned over for $1.
yeah, at this stage, at this juncture, where we haven't been, it seems like we've had some success moving close to this in Waterville. It seems like the right thing to do. we offer it back to the town. I do have one question though on the schedule of renovations. With respect to the mold remediation, was there any capital improvements as part of that? Or was that really just try to
I think there were
restore?
some repairs involved. in that.
That's the only one I kind of struggle with a little bit. Does that mean?
If it ever came to that, yeah, if it ever came to that point, that definitely would be a conversation. So again, it seems like there might be two motions. One is a motion that will answer whether the board is going to retain ownership. Does the board want to cease ownership of the building? And the other would be to reach out to the town, you know, giving me or Dylan or somebody authority to reach out to the town, let them know it's available, give them until a set time. The two motions, I think.
So Jamie, you might want to move forward on the first motion.
I'll make a motion that the board, second motion, I guess. Disposing of the Belvidere.
Second?
Second.
Is that,
Is that,
Lisa, unmuted.
what we'll do is we'll make the motion and open it up for discussion, and you're more than welcome. You have a second?
second.
Any discussion? Discussion, okay. All those in favor of this motion, say aye.
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 Opposed or abstained? Okay. So the second motion,
That we give Belvidere the right of first refusal. And we give them until June 30th to make their decision, and if they decide not to take ownership of the building, then the district is able to pursue other options.
second.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
Do you need to authorize someone to?
Do you need to add somebody like you or Dylan to be involved in that?
It probably would be good.
I move that we authorize Eric or Dylan
So we'll,
to reach out to the town of Belvidere to give them the right of first refusal.
everybody clear on that now?
I'll second that.
Okay.
Revised motion.
All those in favor of the revised motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Cambridge abstains. Okay,
And actually, that was a point that just came up, Mark was just asking. Cambridge doesn't need to abstain because this is overall, it's a district asset, and it's a question about disposition of a district asset, not really elementary operation in particular.
okay. So we're all set.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so Bart and I are going to talk about Governor Scott's proposal for massive transformation of K through 12 education, but I did want to just give some very quick updates. Our calendar for next year has been sent to the Agency of Education, and we're waiting for their approval. Once that happens, we will disseminate it. It looks very much like this year's calendar, and I would say that February and April breaks are aligned with the rest of the state. So it will look very similar. In-district transfer applications are due April 15th. I sent a letter today or a message for principals to put in their newsletters about that it includes the policy and the forum. Again, April 15th is the deadline, and that is that, April 15th. Going forward, in consultation with others from the Agency of Education, the in-district policy is not a required policy. And this policy is doing something that we did not intend it to do, and that is pitting schools against each other. So we may actually look to get rid of a policy. However, we need to make sure that people who are already part of the transfer are not impacted. So if people have transferred, they retain the ability to stay in that school. This won't impact this window of transfers, but we'll discuss it with the board later down the line. Recruitment for Eden Central School and Johnson Elementary School is looking really good as far as applications. I have not seen the applications because I am one of the last people to interview candidates along with the board, but we have really dynamic parents who are spearheading the recruitment for the community engagement piece at Johnson. And because I didn't ask them if I could use their names, I'm not going to, but they are fantastic people and incredible ambassadors for the communities of Johnson and Eden respectively. And then we have internal interview teams that I think those are starting soon, Paula, right?
The interviews.
Yes.
Tomorrow is the interview in Johnson and Thursday is the interviews in Eden.
Okay. And we had a total of 9 applications. Is that about right? Okay. So that's good. And we have some, from what I hear, some strong candidates. So that piece is great. Education quality standards. ADCO is working monthly on what we need to do to implement certain curriculum, looking at things through an equity lens. Yes, we are still doing that. That is what we believe in. And adopting policies. The board needs to think about the following, needs to think about retention, needs to think about professional development and how they support that, needs to think about budget initiatives that align with opportunities for our students and staff. Very clear on that. There is a family engagement piece that we, in some ways, are ahead of because we sent out surveys last year and this year, and the trajectory of responses is impressive, but we can always do better, always. But I like to think that we got almost as many responses to our small community survey that South Burlington did, and that feels impressive to me. So we had a campus forum, we had an Eden forum, and we recently had a Johnson forum. Thank you to the board members that were able to attend. It was really quite inspiring. There are a group of people who love the school and love the opportunities in the school and are able to articulate in a really kind way the things that are working and the things that aren't working so well with very progressive thoughts about what we can do next. So I know, David, you can speak to some of the specifics, but there will be more outdoor learning activities. We have some activities, and I think I'm going to host one on baking and cooking for the community that may want to team with the school more. And birdhouse making, gardening, I mean, just classes for the community and their children, if their children are also interested. I think it would be a nice thing to do. So we will look to have them in the other schools by the end of the year. So that meets the engagement piece of the EQS for the board. And then there will be 3 policies that we need to have. One is a new policy that will affect our librarians and our book collections, and Kim will be working with them to introduce that policy to the board. It's also a VSBA approved policy. We have an equity policy. We will be reviewing it to see what we want to do with it. And then there will be a family and community engagement. Not necessarily a policy, because that one isn't required, but a strategy, a very clearly identified and articulated strategy of how we are going to do our outreach to our communities, individual communities. So that's the EQS piece. Public complaints about personnel. This has come up, actually, this is the only time it's come up. We have them in our handbooks and we have them on our website. The protocol chain of command is that if you have a problem with someone in the school, address it with that person. If that is unresolved, address it with the building leader. The building leader will inform the person who is being sort of complained about, because that is something that we have to do. If people email me about a principal, I always include the principal in that conversation and in that response. If things don't get resolved at the building level, it can come to me and I will work with the principal or the teacher or whomever or the union to respond to the family. I always invite people to come in. I've been advised that perhaps I talk to too many families. That is something that is very important to me. I do try to retain objectivity, but it is something that I am thinking more about. If I have a conversation, for example, with someone and it is unresolved, that person can request a hearing or to come and talk to the board. The board is not compelled to hear it. They do not have to, unless it is something that's covered statutorily. So for example, if a student brings a weapon, we have an expulsion hearing that must happen. That comes before the board. In district transfer, the way it's written, it gets appealed to the board. So the board can't say, I don't feel like hearing it. They need to hear it. If it's something else, the board can say, I don't want to hear it. I've talked to the superintendent or I've talked to the principal, and you can come to public comment, but it won't be agended. So I think that the other piece that's important is that when people email the entire board, the board cannot respond. If the board responds and engages in a conversation, that is a very clear violation of open meeting law. And you want to be neutral enough that if something does rise to the level of the board, you can't have prior knowledge. The exception to that is that I update Mark as board chair on every little thing. The board chair doesn't vote unless the board chair is breaking a tie. So it's best practice. So that's what I do. What else do I need to say about that? I think anything else? I just don't want the community members to feel hurt that the board doesn't respond to them. There is a real reason why the board doesn't respond. And there is a chain of command to follow. I think that is it. That's it. Bart and I are going to talk to you about Governor Scott's transformation plan that involves changes to funding, governance, and education quality. The proposal that is quite dramatic, there's no bill, and it hasn't gone anywhere yet. The proposal suggests that the state of Vermont moves to 5 districts. This district would be part of Winooski Valley group, and that consists of currently 10 districts. There would be 5 elected board members. So let me ask you this. What kind of representation do we think the community would have? And does that feel like equity? Because, and I'm gonna just go off on a little tangent here and then you can start. Who do we think is going to want to run for these seats? They are paid part-time seats. Are these working people? Are these retired people? Are these people who perhaps have the ability to raise funds? Look at our group. Our group would be Barre, Central Vermont, Harwood, Lamoille South, Lamoille North, Montpelier, Roxbury, Orange Southwest, Orleans Southwest, Washington Central School District, and White River Valley. This particular district, in its current suggested configuration, has more small schools than any of the other 4 recommended district alignments. I'm gonna backtrack and let you go.
All right. So just hopefully you all have seen some email blasts from the School Board Association. I know Kat sent a note when this was first announced. The governor foreshadowed it in his inaugural address, and we're seeing more and more details roll out over the past several weeks. So I have some prepared slides here. We'll go a little bit deeper on the revised governance that Kat's alluding to, as well as the foundation formula. Governor Scott has also signaled that there's going to be more guidance and support on guardrails. I haven't seen a lot of details on that, but you know, we might expect to see some stringent requirements or stringent rules around school size. That's probably very much in play. And then also the governor did highlight in his address, just as a reminder, that if school boards can stay to the 5.9% increase projected in the December 1st letter, that his budget would lower the spending with a goal of eliminating that increase altogether. So we will move into the next slide. So we have a very, very aggressive, extremely aggressive timeline, I would say. This is, I think, the biggest education reform that quite possibly the state has ever seen. I don't think that's a stretch. And we are basically going to be set on a path, as it's currently proposed, to fully move to this new funding and governance system in the 27-28 school year. That is just around the corner. So what you would see, I've highlighted some key components here, but we would actually be electing new school district board members in November of 2026, so less than 2 years from now. So if this goes forward as proposed, this board would cease to exist in not very long. And immediately after those elections, they would build the first year budgets for those new school district, close out current school district business, and basically the new districts would take over operations as of July 1st, 2027. Okay. Next slide. So these are just the pillars of education transformation that the governor has proposed. We've seen some details on education funding at this point in time. We've seen a lot of details on governance. I still think there's more to come. So we'll focus on these first 2 pillars in the next few slides. Next. All right, so pay attention to this one. So in the middle of the screen on the right, you can see the Winooski Valley region consists of 14,660 students. That ranges from us at the very tippy top north down to the Winooski, the White River Valley, which is like Sharon, I believe, down in the southern tip. That is a huge geography, huge. And we would actually be the second biggest district in the state behind the Champlain Valley district, which obviously encompasses Chittenden County and Burlington, greater Burlington area. Again, moving from 119 school districts to 5 regional districts, there would be 5 directors in each district. Those are part-time, as Kat noted, part-time elected. As I understand it, there would be wards drawn up, and you would have elections within those wards in your district. I haven't seen a map yet. I don't know, who would be representing us, but I think it's fair to note we have more school districts in this proposed district than the number 5. So there would be districts that exist today that would not be represented at all. In the testimony that the secretary gave late last week, she had indicated that You know, this is probably more than just your normal stipend director position. This is a part-time position. It's gonna take on more responsibilities. And it's safe to say, I don't think this would be conjecture, like with only 25, maybe 27 directors across the state, these are going to be fairly competitive elections that will probably require a decent amount of campaign funds. So it's introducing a whole different element than we're used to in our current school board elections. An important aspect of the governance proposal is the creation of school advisory committees. These will be led by the building principals, and they will provide input on school improvement, equitable budgeting, and on the proposed budget. Those are not elected positions. Representatives within the community, unelected, and they allegedly will have direction over a discretionary amount in the budget. My guess would be, you know, pretty small, but yet to see details on that. There is a very important element around school choice that is wrapped around this governance proposal. So as part of this proposal, each student is assigned a K-12 public school. Each student can also choose to attend a school choice school, which is designated by the district. And it might be school choice schools, plural. Attendance will be determined by a lottery of interested students. And it's very important to note that select state academic and operational requirements do not apply to school choice schools. In other words, the playing field is very uneven. We are going to be potentially sending public dollars to school choice schools that don't have to follow the same rules that we do. I'll leave it up to you whether that sounds fair or not, but I think you probably can understand where I land on the matter. So that, in a nutshell, is the governance proposal. We'll move on. Oh, there's a little bit more. So on the next slide, you probably recall some of us talking about the Picus Audin report that came out late fall timeframe. That was an evidence-based model for funding our schools, and the AOE is largely piggybacking on that. And what they're saying is that district staffing will be based on an evidence-based model of 3,900 students. So what you see in the table here is 29 FTEs that would support 3,900 students. And in this case, using these ratios, the Winooski Valley District, which is 14,660, you could maybe say that the students would have a staff at central office of about 109 based on these numbers. So, you know, pretty big central offices. You know, probably much smaller though than the combined central offices of all the districts, considerably smaller, because this is ultimately where, you know, I presume, I haven't seen all the budget assumptions, but I would presume that this is where the state is coming up with significant savings as part of the education spending. I will pause there. Any questions, any additional comments before I go into the foundation formula?
One thing I'll say to the group as a whole, I mean, I've already sent a letter off to our representatives, the education secretary, as well as the governor. I sent a one-page deal. I was not as sarcastic as the first version that I wrote, but I did send it off. This isn't going to be decided in this school board room here. This is being decided by your legislators. They're the ones that are going to make this decision for you. So if you ever had a time where you wanted to sit down and communicate with them, now would be the time. Because as Bart just showed in the timeline, they want to do this thing really quick. The last meeting that they had on the future of public education last Monday, I thought my letter was kind of direct. There were several people who got on that phone call and we called the education secretary out and said, you're adopting the Pincus report. How can you do that when you've got this collaborative effort you're supposed to be doing? There were several people that asked her the same question. She answered back as a politician might, that they're going forward collaboratively, but this right here is already in front of the legislature. So that's my 2 cents.
Do you want me to read this letter?
Yeah, I think it would be, yeah, I think that would
So,
be great.
so the various organizations are coming together and responding and creating statements to send to the secretary. This one is from the Vermont School Boards Association. It states, Vermont School Boards Association strongly opposes Governor Scott's proposal to radically change education governance in Vermont. Rather than supporting an ecosystem built on strong public schools as portrayed by Education Secretary Zoe Saunders, the plan is a playbook to expanding school vouchers and defunding our public schools. Multiplying the number of students eligible for vouchers will not rein in costs. In other states that have enacted such programs, education costs have skyrocketed. Public education is the core of our strong communities and is critically important for a healthy democracy. It is more important than ever to support our public schools by funding them in a sustainable way. This will involve hard choices to achieve efficiency and scale. The SBA is ready to contribute constructively. Moving from 119 school districts to 5 does not reflect Vermonters' values, no matter what Zoe Saunders says about her Listen and Learn tour. Vermont school board members come from all walks of life and have a proud history of nonpartisan volunteer service for their local communities. This change would politicize school boards by reducing the number of board members statewide from 900 to 25, less than the total number of senators who serve Vermont. These highly competitive races will introduce money into public education governance in a manner never before seen in Vermont. On top of that, this change will exclude those who don't have the ability to survive on a part-time position, making school board service an opportunity reserved for the wealthy or the retired. Governor Scott has waited 8 years to provide Vermonters with a vision for a more affordable and effective education system. The proposal unveiled this week does not achieve either goal. Rather, it will increase costs and increase inequities. The VSBA looks forward to working with policymakers on real solutions that move Vermont public education system forward in a manner consistent with our shared values and constitution. Last thing I will say about this is the first question to be answered is whether the agency of education will be given statutory authority over all of these decisions. The agency believes it will. Go for it.
All right, so I'll jump into the next slide. There's the next slide.
There was a number 6.
I'm looking at it.
Finding the next slide, can I make a comment?
Yes.
It looks to me, this is my opinion. That we
You want the
have-
microphone?
Yeah, that might be a good idea.
I can barely hear you.
These days.
Testing.
It looks to me, and this is just my opinion, you feel free to disagree with me, but we have a Secretary of Education who has not been confirmed by the legislature, and Governor who's hell-bent to drive down the costs of property taxes, and they're looking at us to be the sacrificial lambs. And this school board process that they're trying to impose here is not only going to put it in the hands of the wealthier people, you said retired too, but I don't know if the retired people, if it involves campaigning, if retired people are going to have the money to be able to mount an expensive campaign. And also, it brings politics into the whole situation. We're going to have Republicans and Democrats fighting each other to get these school board positions. And that is the last thing in the world we need in public schools. Leave politics outside, keep it away from the schools.
Thank you. All right, this is the last slide I have, but wanted to make sure you all understood the proposed funding formula. So the governor and the AOE has proposed what we call a foundation funding formula, or a foundation formula. It's actually the most common methodology across the US, and in Vermont, once upon a time, pre-Act 60, actually had a foundation formula. It was deemed unconstitutional as part of the Brigham case. Very important to note. I guess there's probably some questions as to this would stand up a legal challenge, but it has been tweaked slightly, as you'll see here. So the proposed funding formula is that each student would get $13,200 as a base funding. And then it would be adjusted for factors like economically disadvantaged students, English learning students, CTE students. It would be adjusted for things like district sparsity. And so, you know, we've seen some of the details here in the proposal. I'll just run through an example. So let's say, for an economically disadvantaged student, you'd get the $13,200 base, and then you would get an additional $9,900, which is the $13,200 times the 0.75 that you see on the screen here. So ultimately, what the governor is saying is that this, coupled with the governance proposals, would cost $184 million less than the current $2.3 billion that we spend for education. It is also important to note that universal meals is included in this savings number and has been cut from the budget proposal. So just want to make sure everybody understands, you know, I think universal meals is somewhere around 20 million. So not an insignificant part of these savings. And that's what I have for you today. You know, again, I think Eric didn't speak any mistruths earlier, right? I agree with everything he said, and it's very important that we get active on this issue. Talk to our legislators. They need to understand this. They need to understand the impacts that this is going to have on our community. They need to understand the diminished representation that our communities would most likely have as a result of this proposal. So I highly encourage you to read up on this issue. There will be more details that will be sure to come out over the next couple of weeks. They've been releasing more and more details weekly. This is probably the most important issue that, you know, our generation might face as it relates to educating our students. Thank you.
Questions?
Is there a date when the legislation is supposed to vote on this?
Well, when we met with Dan Noyes today and Lucy, there's no bill out there. They're not on the education committees, so we knew more about this than they did. Through no fault of theirs, they just wanted to hear what we had to say. The big thing for all of us, one of the big things for all of us is universal meals. We testified in support of universal meals. We need to have our children able to learn. They need to have nutrition. And we can't go back to a situation where a student is stigmatized because they're getting this other meal because they're free and reduced. That is the worst thing, the worst abuse we can put on a student. And so we need to fight. I will tell you that when we spoke to Dan and Lucy today, they said that the governor can just override. And we said, we understand that, but you need to keep pushing. And so I think we will be working more closely with them going forward.
From a student perspective, she's not here tonight because she's sick. Danielle and I have been looking at all this. We were at first thinking, when I heard 3 years, I said 28, 29, and she said, thank God I'm gonna be a senior and I'm not gonna be around to, but now she'll be a junior, but she was just like, thank God I'll be a senior. And then I won't have to be around her. Questions of this.
I don't know if I missed it. Is this the proposed funding formula? Is that tied to changing revenue streams away from primarily property tax over the income tax, or is that specified yet?
That's separate legislation.
It is
that's being
separate.
considered.
The other thing is, I don't see anything in the proposal that talks about healthcare. And perhaps that should be considered, healthcare costs.
I would add up to that, there is very little to no focus on cost drivers, period, of which healthcare is a massive one, right? So that is a specific position that I know the VSBA has been pushing as well as some of the other. We do. Part of me appreciates how provocative this is, right? I feel like, we do need some changes, but this is extreme. But we need to approach it top down and also bottom up. We need to address some of the cost drivers. It's a missed opportunity.
So if they're part-time employees, will they be offered benefits? Or is it just-
I don't think that's been established yet. You think, most of you, I'm sure by now have read the Incas report. It's almost mirrored in this. So they just dressed us up in green and, well, they did. That's kind of what I alluded to. I wrote my letter, I had fun with that. Well, it's like going to a meeting, we introduce zero. Okay, so now we should be down to the non-represented. So, okay,
Deb, are you looking for a motion? What are you looking?
I would be looking for a motion to go into executive session. I think we Pat and I, maybe, on the board.
And that's the last item, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I guess people can vote.
Sorry. David, since you're on the phone again, when we initiate this, you just need to push *2 and you will enter the executive session breakout room.
so do we have a motion to go into executive session?
Exec session. With the board and Pat Depp.
Second,
Seconded.
all those in favor of going into executive session with the board and Pat and Deb, say aye.
Aye.
Yeah, you followed me.
Do this, non-represented staff pay increase for 6%.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of our motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or
Aye.
abstained? Okay. We have passed it. Is there any other business? They're shaking their head no. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned.